Okay, hello, my friends. Welcome back. Let's talk about argumentative essays and how to effectively write them. We're going to be looking at an effective outline. Now, this outline is going to be very similar to what we talk about when we're looking at informative writing. The structure really is the same, but the purpose is very, very different. Okay, so when you're looking at the main difference between argumentative essays and informative essays, you're looking at what is the purpose for your writing. Right? Are you trying to persuade your reader to take your side, to believe your point, to believe your claim, or are you just informing them of a fact, right? So you can say soccer, I think, is the best sport in the world. That is an argumentative prompt because somebody could argue that, right? Somebody could say, no, football's the best, baseball's the best, no sport is the best. Or you can have something informative that says soccer is played widely around the world, mainly in South America, right? That's a fact. That's a claim that you could stake. So what I want to talk about really quickly is I want to talk about how we structure argumentative as well as informative essays, but then look at the main difference, the main differing paragraph, which is going to be that counter argument. So when you're looking at your first paragraph of your argumentative essay, this is our introduction. So again, this is what I was talking about, looks the exact same as informative, and there's three main parts. The first thing we have to do is we have to make sure that we're starting with an interesting hook. This is something to draw your reader in. I always tell my students, make sure that you never ask a question, because if you are asking a question to your reader and you say, do you believe in love at first sight? And I say no, that means I don't have to read your paper, right? So oftentimes we're taught in middle school to start with a question. There's nothing wrong with that for middle schoolers because middle schoolers are getting used to talking with an audience. However, now that we're in English 1 and 2, ultimately you know how to talk to an audience, you know how to talk to your reader. So for our hook, I'm going to show you guys a couple different things that I recommend to kind of make sure that your hook is broad and you're not talking about the text yet, but it's something that's kind of generally on topic for whatever your thesis is going to be discussing. The second, third, and fourth sentences, this is going to be your tag section. So this is where you're going to say what the title of the text that you're going to be using for your evidence for those C sections in your body paragraphs. You're going to tell me who the author is, what is the genre, so is it a short story, an argumentative scientific journal? Is it a novella? Is it a poem? Okay. And then S is your summary section. This is where you're giving that background information. I call it my bus stop pitch, right? So if somebody's at a bus stop and you're like, oh, hey, have you read To Kill a Mockingbird? You're going to share a generalized summary. You're not going to share, oh yeah, that's when Dill was stuck in a collard patch. It's like, that happens in the book, but that's not the basis of the book, right? So background information is that overarching summary. And then the last sentence is going to be your thesis. This is where you answer the question. So when we're looking at our body paragraphs, we're going to structure this as our ICCTs, right? So this is something that we've been practicing in class. This is where you introduce one of your main points. You cite evidence from the text. You explain and elaborate how the evidence proves the thesis. You cite more evidence from the text, explain and elaborate again, and then transition to your next, okay? And then you have your conclusion paragraph. Now your conclusion paragraph, this is your bow on top. This is where you're just basically restating everything. Okay, I always give the example of, think if a teacher explains the process of photosynthesis. Imagine you're in Miss Otis's class and she's explaining photosynthesis one way and you're like, Miss Otis, my best friend, I don't understand what you said at all. Because she's a good teacher, she's going to then go back and re-explain it in a different way. She's explaining the exact same thing, right? She's not changing any of the facts. She's just rewording it. So this is what we do with our thesis statement, because you want to be super sure that your reader knows by the time they get to your conclusion what your thesis is, okay? Then your third, fourth, and fifth sentences are you summarizing those main points. That's restating your E statements. And then you have the ending impression. This is the drop mic section. This is where you basically have, why does this matter, right? Why does this impact the world? How does it impact the reader? What should we take away ultimately from the essay? Now, here's the biggest difference. The biggest difference is going to be your counter argument. Now, I cannot stress this enough, sweet friends. If you do not have a counter argument for your argumentative essay, you do not have an argumentative essay. You have to have one in order for it to be anything above a 1. So a counter argument is when the writer is going to address the opposite viewpoint in order to make their claim stronger. Okay, so this is how we generally structure it. I've kind of formatted it in an ICE-T acronym. You don't have to remember this necessarily. You just have to remember what part goes where. Okay. So for the first sentence of a counter argument, you introduce what other people believe in terms of the opposite of your argument. So let's just say we just finished the text, part 1 of To Kill a Mockingbird. And one of our argumentative essay prompts is going to be, is Atticus an effective father? Let's say you've decided, yeah, Atticus Finch is a very effective father. He prepares his kids for this upcoming trial. He prepares his kids for life and makeup. The opposite of that would be what? Atticus Finch is not an effective father. So you would need to introduce that some people think this, right? Some people believe that. So you would say, some believe Atticus Finch is not an effective father based off of key events that happened to his kids. Then, immediately, notice the second section, you convince the reader why this is wrong. You immediately introduce it, and then you knock it at the knees, right? So you pat him at the back, hit him at the knees, explain, this is what other people think. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, basically, is what you're saying. But you have to say it formally. So you convince the reader why this doesn't make any sense. Well, there's tons of evidence that proves that Atticus isn't very effective. And, good thing for you, if that is your argument, you've already explained it in 3 body paragraphs. So you have a lot of evidence to support your side of the claim. And then you explain why your thesis is correct. You're further emphasizing it. Then that last section, you summarize the main point. Okay? So something to note with the counter argument. You never want to talk too much about what the other side believes for a counter argument. Because what I've seen sometimes with students is they'll have a beautiful essay, they've got a strong thesis, and they've got great body paragraphs, and their evidence is beautiful. Then they get to their counterclaim, and then they start convincing me that their thesis is stupid, that their thesis doesn't make sense because their counterclaim is so strong for the other side. That's why, if you notice, there's only one sentence explaining the other side, and then you explain why it doesn't make sense. Re-emphasize why your point is the strongest claim. You do not want your counter argument to persuade your reader the other way. Okay? Now, let's talk about some quick sentence starters. And again, you can pause this video and kind of look at this if you need to as you're kind of working through your own essay. So when we were talking about a hook, right, we're going to talk about what a good hook would be for us now that we're in high school, talking about that tag section and then that thesis. So let's look at our hook first. My 2 biggest tips for writing a hook would be 1, pick one word from the prompt and define it for your reader, or share a generalized statement about whatever the topic is. So let's just use Romeo and Juliet, right? That's my example here. Now, we haven't read Romeo and Juliet yet at this point, if you're watching it. We're about to read it after a fall break. Get excited because it's so good. It's very messy. So one of the questions I ask students after reading Romeo and Juliet is, how is Romeo impulsive, right? So if we're looking at my first tip, pick one word in the prompt to define it for your reader. Define what it means to be impulsive. Okay, so an example could be, to be impulsive means that a person acts too quickly on their emotions instead of thinking through the consequences. Immediately, I've hooked my reader into the main topic of my essay, but I did not mention Romeo. I did not mention Shakespeare. I did not mention my thesis. I'm just explaining what it means to be impulsive because that's setting my reader up for success. Because if they get to my thesis and I'm saying, yeah, Romeo's impulsive because XYZ, but they don't know what the word impulsive means, that's going to be pretty hard for them to understand what I'm talking about. Okay, so picking one word from the prompt and defining it for your reader is not only setting your reader up for success, but it's also setting your essay up for success because they're going to know what you're talking about. And next is sharing a generalized statement. And again, this is when you're looking at something broad. This is a generalized topic. So how is Romeo impulsive in the play? Well, acting too quickly on emotions can lead to a lot of dangerous consequences. Again, I'm just kind of redefining and restating a generalized ish statement about being impulsive, what that looks like. And again, what is that doing? That's setting my reader up for what I'm about to be talking about, which is Romeo and Juliet. Okay, now, I always give this caveat for my freshmen. So if my sophomores are watching this, this does not apply to you. If you are on a timed essay, let's say we're doing the T and Ready, for example, and you have an argumentative essay and you have sat and thought about your hook for 5-10 minutes and you cannot open the floodgates, right? You are having the writer's block of a lifetime. And you're like, I have to ask a question because the time is ticking. Now, no. Okay, my first 2 tips. But if that still isn't helpful, here's my last tip if you have to ask a question. Ask an open-ended question without saying you. Okay, so an example of this is how is Romeo impulsive in the play? All right, that's our thesis. Okay, so let's look at, can listening to emotions get people into trouble that ultimately affect others? This is what the reader sees in Romeo and Juliet. Then you can go straight into your hook. So notice I did not ask my reader something directly. I didn't say you. Have you ever listened to people's emotions? Have you gotten into trouble based off of impulsivity? Right? It was a broad, open-ended question without saying you. Again, please don't use this. But I only say that through the caveat of if you are looking at a timed essay and the clock is ticking and you are stuck on that hook, revert back to that kind of elementary writing, and that'll kind of help open it up, and then maybe you can go back and revise it, okay? So let's look at BFAT tag. It's basically the same thing. There's tons of different ways to structure this part of your sentence, and you can kind of see all the different formulas here. So you can say, in author's format title, he writes about summary, or in the format title, author writes about summary, whatever. Or in title, a format by author, the reader learns about summary. And notice how I've just taken the underlined portion and I've just plugged it in. So if you are a math person, you're welcome. This is a formula for you, okay? So if you're looking at the first formula, you could say, in William Shakespeare's play, Romeo and Juliet, he writes about 2 young lovers. So I have everything that I need for my BFAT or my tag section. I have my title, I have what my author's name is, I've got the genre, and I've got a summary. Okay, and again, look at that second one. I'm including everything the same. In the play Romeo and Juliet, William Shakespeare writes about 2 young lovers. Okay, so again, I'm having all the required information before I start pulling in that really, really important evidence. And then our thesis, really quickly, because we've talked about theses a lot at this point. Thesis is where you answer the question. Typically, you put in 3 main points, 1 for each body paragraph. You can also do an intended thesis, which I try to steer my student towards, especially my sophomores, because once you get into doing literary criticism in your junior and senior year, you're going to have to get away from that 3-point marker in your thesis statements, and you're going to have to start pulling in analogies and figurative language and all of these things. And so I try to steer you guys away from doing like, we know he's impulsive because he kills XYZ, right? And those are your 3 main points. Now, if you need that to be organized and you're a freshman, do it up. But you can just share a generalized thesis, just answer the question in general, and then you can, then go on to your next point. So thesis, last sentence of your intro, you answer the question. Now again, here's some sentence starters for those ICCTs if you need them. This is how you cite evidence. We know we never do what we call a drop quote, where you just like drop in the quote for your reader. It's like a fire hydrant to the face. And so making sure that you are introducing your quote somehow in some way. It can be something simple like this, like, for example, the author writes on page whatever. You can pull it in any way you want as long as you've introduced the quote before you put the quote in for those sections. Then again, here's some more sentence starters for how to explain evidence. Again, this is review for us. Now let's talk about how to restate your thesis in your conclusion. So So when you restate your thesis, you're just rephrasing the last sentence. So let's say this is our first thesis, right? The reader can see how Romeo is impulsive in the play by his love for Juliet, his attempt at suicide, and his actual suicide. Let's just say those are our three, our three main points from our first thesis. By the time you get to your conclusion, you're restating all of that. You're not introducing anything new. It's exactly what you just said before. So through several events, including his own death, a reader can see easily just how impulsive Romeo truly is. That's the same thing. I said the same thing, right? I said the exact same fact, but I said it in a different way. Okay, so when you're restating your thesis, just kind of flip it a little bit. Just take whatever your end of your thesis is, put it at the front, put whatever's at the front at the back, then you've restated it. Okay. Summary of main points, it's the same thing. So again, you're just looking at those E statements. You're just re-summarizing those E's, restating those E's from your ICCTs. Now, call of action is important, the ending impression. This is where you give your reader something to think about or explain why they should care, but do not say the word you. I don't want to see you. I don't want to see me. I don't want to see I, us, any of that in your essay, okay? So let's say, again, we're looking at this idea, how is Romeo impulsive in the play? This is an example call of action. By acting without thinking, people can actually do way more harm to themselves and others than what people may think. Beautiful. I broadened my horizon a little bit. I'm not just narrowly talking about the text. I'm talking about in general. Why is this important for the world? How should my reader care? Why should my reader care? Another example, it is clear that people must learn to control their emotions and think about consequences before they act. If not, could be dangerous results. Again, I'm talking about the world. I'm talking something general. I'm not talking about the characters anymore. I'm talking about how it impacts the world around us. But I didn't say us. I didn't say you. I didn't say we. I didn't say me. I said the reader. I said people. Okay? That makes it academic. That makes it formal. When you start saying you should care because XYZ, you're just writing a letter, my friends. And I love letters. Letter writing is a lost art. However, we're not writing a letter. We're writing an essay. Okay? So anytime you want to say you or me or us or we, say people. Say the reader. Say the audience. Okay? Now, again, things to leave out of your paper. Personal pronouns. Look at that. Psychic. I knew what I was about to say. Right? So don't have any personal pronouns ever in your essay anywhere unless it's in a quote somehow. Second, leave out elementary words. So these are commonly I see these used in transitions like first, second, third, in conclusion. Leave those out. Okay, those are for like middle school writers. And then informal language, finna to, do, writer, do, etc. Okay, make sure you don't include those. Okay. Okay, you've got it. Again, look at the outline as you're using this. Look back at anything. Pause for the sentence starters if you need it. And you guys will do great. I believe in you. Bye.